So, hi everyone, my name is Ravish and I teach philosophy and literature. And welcome to yet another lecture on literature. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about Albert Camus, one of the most influential, you can say, philosopher and novelist of the 21st century. So Albert Camus, he was born in Algeria and he moved to France. So he was an Algerian-born French philosopher, and he was born on the eve of a pointless, devastating war, which is the Second World War. And he could not see his father. Because his father was dead when he was 1 year of age. So he never knew his father. And you can understand the way the isolation that we find in Camus' work is gravely, it's already in there since his childhood, because he never knew his father. Now, his exploration of the absurd nature of human condition made him a kind of, a literary genius, because most of his work is concerned with the human suffering, human existence, human life, and how we suffer. There's a very beautiful statement by Arthur Schopenhauer. He writes that the life is a constant process of suffering, and it's true. And if you see, if you look it through an existentialist point of view, then you know that it's quite true, because everybody suffers, and there's a it's kind of there's a passion in suffering as well, like the more you suffer, the more you become who you are, right? Anyway, so basically this video is more concerned with Camus' first novel, which is called The Stranger, or you can say L'Étranger, which is a French pronunciation, L'Étranger, or The Stranger, or The Outsider, because when this book was published, actually this was published as L'Étranger, which is The Stranger, in France and in Britain. But in some parts, like for instance United States of America, they published this book under the name of The Outsider. So do not confuse between the names. Alright? The Stranger and The Outsider, both are the same name, from the same book, from the same author. Alright? But it's always better to pronounce in French, because French is a very lucid, it's very, let's say, different kind of language. It has some kind of tone, L'Étranger, right? Anyway, so this book was published in 1942, and when Camus wrote this book, actually he was only 29 years of age, and this made him a literary genius. This particular book made him gave him a lot of fame. And for this, he also won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So, and you should also know that Camus was the second youngest, Nobel Prize winner in the history of English literature. And he got his Nobel Prize when he was 44 years of age. I think 44 or 46. Please do check it out. And the other youngest person who won the Nobel Prize was Rudyard Kipling, and he won the Nobel Prize at the age of 42. Alright, by the way, I don't like Rudyard Kipling at all. There's this book called The White Man's Burden. It's very anyway, I'm not going to talk about that particular poem in this video. So now The Stranger, which is L'Étranger, is one of the major, or let's say one of the first major novel Camus has written, right? And this novel gave an idea to the world, to the rest of the world, that what kind of novelist he was, and what kind of person he was, what kind of literary genius he was, because every time a person writes a book, every time a writer, an author writes a book, he kind of leaves his remark on his readers. This is when people understood him. This is when people got to know about Camus. And Camus was not just influenced by his contemporary, but he was also influenced by so many, so many, let's say, old philosophers. Like he almost read so many philosophers, because if you read the myth of Sisyphus, then you would know that he was kind of criticizing or trying to understand, the entire human suffering, through the lens of what he saw. And actually, there is also one thing you need to remember, because he was also living throughout, because he was born on the eve of devastating war, which is Second World War, and he saw people dying. Even he lost his father at the age of just one, right? So yeah. Now, this particular novel, L'Autre, is basically it's a deep philosophical, and yet very simple. Because if you read the novel, it's very simple, it's very lucid, but it's very it's deeply philosophical. And many times people ask me, like, which philosophy book should I go, which philosophy book should I begin with. I tell them go with Camus, because you can never go wrong with Camus, because every time you read Camus, it's very easy to grasp, it's very easy to understand, right? And now let's move on to this specific chapter, or let's to this specific book. So Camus begins with a very different kind of tone, with a different kind of beginning, because this is one of the most famous beginning of a novel. He says, "Mother died." You see, every time I read this book, I remember I read this book like 2 years back, and I was literally fell in love with this one. Anyway, so he writes that mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I don't know. The telegram from whom says, your mother passed away. Funeral tomorrow, deep sympathy. Now he says that it's very doubtful, because it could have been yesterday. He doesn't know, right? Now you see the statement, the mother died yesterday. So there is no feeling at all. His mother is dead, and there is no grievance on his face. He simply says what he says, right? And we will come to that, all right? So there are a couple of things you need to remember, when you begin this book, because I really, every time I make video on any particular philosopher or any particular novelist, I urge my students to go and read the text itself, because the more you read the text, the better you get to those philosophers, get into the minds of those philosophers. So this particular novel is basically, it has a kind of question of justice and the meaning of the guilt, because you see Méruchon, the character Méruchon, I don't know the correct pronunciation in French, I think it's Méruchon, and he's filled with guilt, but he never feels the guilt. He doesn't care about the morality, about the herd system, because he's unique, he's different in his own way, he's a stranger, as the name suggests. So there one more point that I want to make is Camus was an existentialist, but he never, he always claimed that I'm not an existentialist, so please don't call me an existentialist. But his ideas, his thoughts, his books, will always be a great part of existentialist literature. I think there's one reason why he wanted to refuse, this existentialist tag, because he had a feud between Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a great friend of Camus, and at the end of his career, at the end of his life, what happened is that Camus has a different ideology, and Sartre has a different ideology. So Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus, they broke up, and from there we started seeing Camus removing himself this tag that I'm not an existentialist, because initially Jean-Paul Sartre is known to be the first existentialist thinker of the 20th century. Now, anyway, at the end of when Camus died in a car crash, and he died fairly young. And some people say that it was KBZ or something like that. Some people who actually made some kind of, like, they actually they were the reason behind killing Camus, behind the killing, behind having the car crash. Anyway, I'm not going to go much in the details. You can go and read on the internet, right? So at the end, when Camus died, Jean-Paul Sartre writes that Camus was perhaps my only good friend. So this was very unique. Anyway, so when I talk about this particular novel, L'Étranger, which is The Stranger, so I can give you a brief summary, and this can be this particular novel can be understood simply within few sentences, because what happens, we see that a man's mother is dead, which is Mélenchon's mother is dead, and he attends her funeral, and later he kills an Arab man, just because of the sunlight, just because of the heat, and then for that murder he's been sentenced to death, and he's been prosecuted at the end. So this is overall the idea, but when we go deep into it, then we understand how a man, which is a Mélenchon, is suffered, is being estranged, and is being outcasted by the society, So now, so some of the theme that I would like to mention is that the stranger is a man confronting to the world, because this stranger. So there's a statement, and I'm quoting from his book called The Myth of Sisyphus. He says, "A stranger man among men." So a man is a stranger among men. You see, and hence the title, because you see, this Mélenchon, he feels that he's a stranger within a society where a lot of people are there, because he meets with a lot of people. He has a friend, he works in an office, corporate office. So there are a lot of people, but yet he felt that he's a stranger, and no one is listening to him. No one is trying to understand him. Even at the end of this, even at the end of the novel, you see the judge himself does not understand him. They refuse to understand, or let's say they had a different kind of understanding of altogether. So so this is where this absurdism comes, because a man is an absurd, and you see Camus never says that we should commit suicide, because this is the fundamental question that Camus asks, that why should you kill yourself, why should you commit suicide, right? So anyway, what is most exciting, what is most enchanting about Camus is that his novels, any novel, whichever novel you read, like for instance you read The Outsider or The Fall, or if you read there's another novel which I'm forgetting. Anyway, so whenever you read him, you resonate so deeply with his works, not because it's strange in that most of us are strange, like in a sense. It's not in a sense that most of us are strange in this world, because let's say this is my ideology. I'm just giving you an idea. Do we know anyone at all? I mean, do we know our mother? Do we know our father? Do we know our sister, brother, or even our close friends? You never know, because there are billion of thoughts, running within our brain, within any individual's brain, and you can never understand those thoughts. One individual. Like even myself, I cannot even understand myself, 100%. So how can I believe that the outer world, that doesn't exist within me, it exists outside me? How can they know me, when I don't even know myself? So that's the one point. But anyway, I do believe that everyone is a strange man. Every person is a strange in their own self, So here we see the Mélenchon is a strange man among so many people, and he doesn't abide by the social code, that most people abide, because most people would feel sad when their mothers die, when their mothers dead. So every time somebody dies, we feel sad. Most people would feel sad. Most people in community would feel sad. But Mirsh, he doesn't feel sad at all. He doesn't cry at all. So in that sense, he's a stranger. And sometimes I feel like maybe he's trying to be honest what he feels, and that's when nobody understands him, And I will read out some passages, so that you will know how he's trying to be, how he's trying to be honest with the people, how he's trying to say whatever he wants to say, or he always says, he never wants to say anything, more than he has to say. So he always ends, his statement when he wants to end. So he doesn't describe much. He doesn't, say much. He simply, ends the conversation. Right. Now, Camus, Camus is like, see, when Camus kills an Arab, for no other reason, but he always says that this is the heat, the violence, the violence heat, and the sunlight on the deserted beach that led him to kill that Arab man. And for that particular reason, for that same reason, when we as a reader, when we read, that particular passage, we feel that, we kind of, exclude him from humanity. We expel him from the normal society. And we regard him as a criminal. That is when, and this is the part where I feel, the main story lies. The moment he kills that Arab, he kills not just once, but he kills him 5 times. So I will read that passage. There is one more point that I wanted to make, which I have already made earlier, but I'm repeating this statement. He says, he never wants to say anything more than he has to say, right? And now I will read some passages, and you will see that he stops whenever he wants to stop. He doesn't go far beyond whatever there is. Because he's a deeply honest man, even though he's an anti-hero here, but he's a deeply honest person. So I will just read out some of the passages, So in the first chapter itself, he says, I thought for a bit, then explained that they weren't quite consecutive. I fired one of us. So this is where he actually kills the Arab, and he said, I fired one at first, and the other 4 after a short interval. So the judge, at the trial, the judge asks him, why did you, pause between the first and the second shot? And then he says, I seem to see it hovering again before my eyes, the red glow of the beach, and to feel that fiery breath of my cheeks. And this time I made no answer. So you see, he's not blaming the sun or the heat. He's simply saying, this is the cause. I have no intention of killing anyone. I had no intention of killing the Arab. It just, the heat came onto me, the sun came onto me, and it was in intense light. There was a fleeting flash of white light, and I couldn't think. I just killed him. There's another statement when Marie, his girlfriend, she comes, she comes next morning to meet him, and there she says, there is a statement. He says, and I'm quoting, I told Marie about the old man's habit, and it made her laugh. She was wearing one of my pajama suits and had sleeves rolled up. When she laughed, I wanted her again. A moment later, she asked me if I loved her. You see, this is, I want you to catch the statement. A moment later, she asked me if I loved her. I said that sort of question had no meaning really, but I supposed I didn't. So he's saying he knows that he doesn't love his girlfriend, and he was very honest with that. Any man would have said, yes, of course I do, or whatever. But he's trying to be very honest here, So whatever he wants to say, he just says. And he doesn't say anything more than he wants to say, right? And later you'd find that there's a statement where Marie asks, like, whether if you want to marry me. And still, his answer is like, it's very absurd. He says, Marie came that evening and asked me if I would marry her. I said I didn't mind. If she was keen on it, we would get married. I just want you to hear it. Then she asked me again if I loved her. I replied, much as before, that her question meant nothing or next to nothing. But I suppose I did not. If that's how you feel, she said, why marry me? I explained that it had no importance really, but if it would have given her pleasure, we could get married right away. I pointed out that, anyhow, the suggestion came from her. As for me, I would merely say yes. Then she remarked that marriage was a serious matter, to which I answered no. She kept silent after that, staring at me in a curious way. Then she asked, suppose another girl had asked you to marry her. I mean, a girl you liked in the same way as you like me. Would you have said yes to her too? And he says, naturally, yes. That is an absurd answer, you see. And he's also deeply honest here. And then she said, she wondered if she really loved or not. I, of course, couldn't, enlighten her as to that. So, you see, okay, so there's more statement, and I dare say that's why I love you, she added. But maybe that's why one day I will come to hate you. To which I had nothing to say, so I said nothing. You see, at the end, he doesn't say anything because when she said that maybe I will start hating you, maybe because of this absurdity, and then he doesn't respond because he doesn't want to respond at all. So this absurdity you will find almost in every statement, almost in every paragraph. So there's another statement that I would read it out where he doesn't say much, where he could have defended himself. So this is a case where actually the judge is trying to question him, and I'm quoting, the presiding judge gave a short cough and asked me in a very low tone if I had anything to say. I rose, and as I felt in the mood of speak, I said the first thing that crossed my mind, that I had not intention of killing the Arab. The judge replied that this statement would be taken into consideration by the court. Meanwhile, he would be glad to hear, before my counsel addressed the court, what were the motive of my crime so far. He must admit he didn't fully understood the ground of my defense. You see, this is where you find the absurdity or the alienation from the society himself, because he was very honest. He was honestly answering everything, and whatever he felt, whatever he had to say, he's very honest. But the judges, they wanted to hear something. What are the motives behind killing? Because you see, there was no motive at all. Because this is what absurdity is. He was on the beach, and he just looked at the Arab, and then there was a fleeting light, the fleeting flashing of white light, came onto his eyes, and he just fired the gun, and then he paused and he fired 4 times again. So it was all the sun, because of the sun he fired, and he's telling that, he's trying to explain that to the judge, but no one would listen because they felt that there should be, there would have been some kind of, intention behind killing the Arab, right? So I tried to explain that it was because of the sun, but I spoke too quickly and ran my words into each other. You see, he kept saying that it was because of the sun, because of the sun, because of the light, but no one would listen. That's when you realize that it's a very strange man. He's a very strange man, because no one would kill. No one would simply kill because of the light, because of the sun to someone, right? And then fire 5 times. So I hope you would find this video informative, and please do read it, because until and unless you read the novel itself, then you won't understand, you won't get the view, you won't get the same passion as Camus was writing. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.